Liam Cohen now running the ship in Jacksonville. How high can we raise the play of Trevor Lawrence? What are we getting from Travis Hunter and where? All of that here as we explore the Jacksonville Jaguars here on Locked On NFL Scouting.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Krabs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to issue a big thank you, shout out, and welcome to our everydayers. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Joe, fighting for my life yesterday. How was your day? Did any news happen that you saw in your world?
Nah, man, just did my podcast and played with my kids, that was all for me.
That was not my day yesterday, but so I'm excited to be not talking about Jalen Ramsey, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Jonnu Smith trade for about what we'll call it 32 minutes or so.
Yeah,
and I'm sure I'll put that hat back on as soon as we're done here and find 18 different new angles to take it from. But we're putting the Jaguars under the spotlight, second team in the AFC South. And obviously some big changes organizationally. James Gladstone, Liam Cohen, trying to put the right situation around Trevor Lawrence. Really feels like it continues to be the spotlight. And look, if it's another leap as far as what it went from when it was Urban Meyer to Doug Peterson, if you make another leap forward, I think Jacksonville has a lot to be excited about. But we're not really going to talk too much about Trevor himself because that's part of the quarterback conversation, which we do after we do all the rosters. So we're looking at skill players, the trenches, the back seven. We're putting players in buckets like roster cornerstones, quality starters, sufficient level starters, quality depth players, replacement level players, rookies, incomplete evaluations, non-roster caliber players, or practice squad caliber players. Each one of those positions and buckets comes with a point value that gets weighted. And when we are done the roster, we have like a roster power ranking score that we can then compare to the rest of the league. And this is our 29th. No, this is our 30th team. We have two more after today, Joe. So Jacksonville, skill players is where we're starting.
We are. And you talked about improving things around Trevor Lawrence, elevating that ecosystem, if you will. And
was that one of his phrases? Was that one of Gladstone's?
Yeah, I got 4 or 5. I'll drop them in. As the show moves on. But right now we're talking about how they've elevated the ecosystem around Mr. Trevor Lawrence. And that really started last year with, an absolute steal in Brian Thomas Jr. And remember, Trevor Lawrence didn't even play the whole year, right? He missed some time. And Brian Thomas Jr. still produced. He's proven a lot in a very short period of time. I put him in the quality starter bucket. And I think it's just a matter of how much more we can get out of him. And I think he's going to be knocking on the door of a franchise cornerstone, but legitimately came in and gave this team so much production and looks like he's going to be a mismatched player. And then they get Travis Hunter, who, it sounds like they're going to give him a real shot to play both sides of the ball. And dynamic's the word, right, with Travis Hunter. And he can certainly bring a lot to either side of the football. I'm excited to see the role and how much volume there is on both sides of the football. But that's a dangerous piece. And then they definitely rolled the dice on De'Ami Brown, who late last year for Washington showed the verticality that got you and I both excited about him coming out of North Carolina a few quiet years. But they get some stable quarterback play and Cliff Kingsbury and the impact of that overall Washington situation. You saw him get down the field and make some of those plays. And so when you think about just the dynamic, explosive play potential here of these three, plus don't forget Parker Washington came on late last year when he was healthy. And he looked like he can be a nice player. Brenton Strange, dynamic athlete. You can see here, we didn't even get into the running backs. There's a lot to talk about there, but dynamic is the name of the game for what exists around Trevor Lawrence. Now, there's a lot to prove, but you can look at this and I don't know, it just screams explosive plays to me.
Well, and two really explosive athletes on the outside in Hunter and Brian Thomas. And what I like about those two guys being the two faces of the wide receiver room is how their skill sets complement one another, right? It's one thing to have two really speedy, twitched up guys like Miami has, or has two really big bodied, outside the numbers, catch point guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins like Cincinnati has. You get the big body guy and you get like the twitch guy, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's not to say that Brian Thomas Jr. isn't twitched, but the suddenness at the top of routes and to be able to break off suddenly and create massive amounts of separation like that's where, as Travis Hunter continues to refine his skills, and whether it's primarily on offense or partially on offense or full-time on both, and just continues to develop more time in his craft, where he's split his reps in college. You expect him to just become that much more prolific as far as the details of what he does. And there's very little question in my mind about the athlete that he is. So that on the outside, when you match it with Liam Cohen's football ideology, I think is where you can see the vision of where they're trying to go and how these can be really exciting pieces that kind of serve as the headline. Now, you mentioned Brown, Washington. I do worry a little bit from a depth perspective because I think Brown is a quality depth player. I think Parker Washington right now I'd put as a quality depth player. Obviously, the book's not totally written there, and Brown in a new situation, who knows how good he becomes. But I mean, your 5 and 6 names are names like Irwin and Trammell and Cephas, and so if you tell me you're going to get the full slate from Thomas and Brown, Thomas and Hunter, like Hunter playing a lot of snaps, like some dings and bumps and bruises, and it's a lot of wear and tear. So I think if you just look at the other side of the coin, that's the thing I think Jacksonville just needs to be smart about, in my mind.
Yeah, and I think figuring out how to optimize Travis Hunter for this football team this year is what they're going to have to figure out. But the boundaries of football are meant to be tested, and that's certainly something that Travis Hunter will allow this team to explore. Running back is fascinating, Kyle, because Travis Etienne obviously did not have the year 3 that I think a lot of people were hoping for. I think Tank Bigsby was probably the better running back. But the guy it feels like that this regime hand-selected is Bashal Tutin. To me, it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time. Yeah, hold on to the ball. Yeah, don't fumble, dude. And it was already some rumblings already with some of the OTA stuff. But if he can take care of ball security, which is something we've seen players figure out, I'm really eager to see how he emerges here. And I think a little bit about Liam Cohen last year with Tampa and how it was like the Rashad White situation. And the next thing you know, Bucky Irving creeps in there and has some moments, Sean Tucker. And the next thing you know, it's, Bucky Irving's situation. And so I feel like that could happen here. But I mean, ultimately 3 pretty complementary players that between Etienne and Tutin, you have a lot of explosive ability. With Bigsby, you have the battering ram between the tackles. I like the makeup of this, but I think beyond this year, this could really take a different form. I don't know how much they're going to want to stay committed to Etienne, and it feels like Tutin's going to be the guy there long term, perhaps.
I might try to cash out there if I were them.
Yeah,
on Etienne, because Bigsby, as you mentioned, I mean he had more carries last year. He had a very robust 7 touchdowns, over 750 yards, and he's the more physical of the 2 runners. And you pair that with Tutin, who has all that home run hitting ability, explosive, wide zone type of speed. And then they also have LaQuinn Allen, who they drafted in the 7th round, who I think is a really good pass game profile type of player. So you've got, I believe he was one of like 10 players in the class that was 20 on draft day. So he's one of the younger players. So you brought in Tutin and Allen in the draft this year, not even undrafted free agents. You used picks on both of those players with Tank Bigsby, who kind of emerged, I think fits. You got a physical guy who could pound the rock with Bigsby. You got the wide zone explosive play guy in Tutin. You got LaQuinn Allen. So maybe it all doesn't come together for all those guys in the here and now. But I don't say you're playing with house money, but you're one of the regime, right? If you were ever going to have a time to like be good process oriented and maybe make some hard personnel decisions, now's the time to do it.
Yeah.
So I just look at Etienne, knowing, what his pedigree was, knowing the year he had last year, and knowing what they have not only in Bigsby, but in the rest of the pipe with the other 2 draft picks that they made. I'd want to try to get those guys onboarded and be a part of the vision that you had. And obviously a 4th round pick in Tootin, you have some big vision for him in particular.
It's a fascinating idea to invoke about cashing out on Etienne, because I think there's 4 backs that are on expiring contracts right now that have very complicated long-term futures with their teams. Travis Etienne's one of them. James Cook is one of them. Breece Hall is one of them. And Ken Walker in Seattle is one of them. And all of those guys have big play potential. And I think they complicate each other's situations that they're all on expiring deals. And of course, the running back dynamic to begin with. So that's an interesting call out. I don't know if that will happen, but it's something
I don't think that it would, but
right, but it's worth talking about.
If I was James Gladstone, I would at least you didn't mention Kyron Williams either, who's also one of
extremely complicated. He's not the big play back, but he's the everything else
the most
is so
productive
good.
of all these backs, other than James Cook's touchdown production, right?
Boy, yeah. Wow. Okay, some very weird running back situation. That sounds like a podcast we might have to schedule for in a few weeks once we get through all this type of stuff. All right, we will get into the offensive line, the defensive line here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning for a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. When I first started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. And it's pretty surprising, folks, how much certain spending habits will add up, and Monarch makes it easy to identify them. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
2 things. First of all, happy Bobby Bonilla Day to you.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes.
He got his
happy for him,
40th $500,000 payment, and he's got like another 10 years. And then also we failed to mention Jacksonville hoarding former 3rd string tight ends from our favorite teams like Infinity Stones.
I like it for Quentin Morris, though. I think it's a great chance for him. I think he's been a good tight end 3 for Buffalo. Played the most special team snaps last year. It's a good situation where Brenton Strange is going to be the guy, but I mean, more opportunity should be here for him than Buffalo. So good on him.
Yeah. And Hunter Long, obviously, they brought in Munt, Long, and Morris.
Yeah.
All this offseason.
Yeah.
So they are serious about having some 12 personnel potential. And I don't know for Hunter, I think Munt is a pretty big roadblock for him in having meaningful snaps, but a nice kind of roll of the dice for a former top 100 draft pick there.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And obviously came over with Gladstone from Los Angeles, because Long was a part of the Jalen Ramsey deal that sent Ramsey to Miami.
Well, someone's probably not going to make the team barring an injury, so we'll see.
Maybe Miami reunion. Let's go. We got some.
They heard about them needing a tight end, maybe.
Projected 5 for Jacksonville: Walker Little, Ezra Cleveland, Robert Hainsey, Patrick McCarry, Anton Harrison. Big wild card here is 3rd round draft choice Wyatt Milam, who I think would probably be best served living in the guard center world. I know he played tackle, but just that length that exists there, I think he could realistically play any of those 3 interior spots. You get into a really bad spot at tackle, he could probably get you out of a game. But they have a 4th round draft choice from last year in Javon Foster. They brought in Fred Johnson from Philadelphia, leaving the school of Stoutland. So he graduated from Stoutland U, went somewhere else now. Chuma Adoga has played some tackle. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you got a lot of options behind the 5, and I think you've got a pretty good amount of positional flexibility with the front 5 as well.
Well, anytime Patrick McCarry is one of your starting offensive linemen, you're going to be able to, figure out the puzzle however you need
that
to.
$12 million per year average
Right.
by being a chameleon.
Sure.
Wherever we need you to go, you're going to go and play.
Robert Hainsey as well is another guy that's been versatile, and it just hit me that Tampa Bay, Liam Cohen, that's a good little parallel there. As Mitch Morse, they release him and then he retired, if I'm not mistaken. But two young tackles in Little and Harrison. I think Harrison, I thought, had good growth from year 1 to year 2. Hopefully, it all comes together in year 3. And Walker Little, I think, has been a sufficient starter. It's just a matter of availability, which has literally been the story with Little his entire football career. So. Ezra Cleveland, I think, is a sufficient starter. I have this entire offensive line graded as a sufficient level starter. You mentioned the depth, like you said, Johnson, Udoga, experienced players, and so is Luke Fortner. For his time when he was a starter here, there's some snaps that guys have taken here in the reserves, and I really kind of like Javon Foster as well. So, I don't think there's a star here. I don't think there's a quality, like, high impact blocker. Maybe you can get that out of Harrison or even Walker Little, as I think there's maybe some more ceiling to unpack there. But I see a sufficient player at every starting spot with some experience depth and also some appealing young depth in Foster and Milam.
Fortner's another one you wonder about he's in a contract year.
Carryover.
Third round draft choice, carryover from an old regime. They drafted Jonah Monheim, who I think is a center exclusive player, and Milam, I think, can play center.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm Jacksonville. I'm looking at a couple of these holdovers, and I'm asking myself, hey, what can we get a 5 or a 6?
Sure.
And obviously third round draft choice for Fortner, but that's the cost of doing business when you make regime changes. And they're kind of telling you with Monheim, I think can be a reasonable floor center, and Milam has position flex.
Yeah.
So it's another name for me that as I'm looking and I'm trying to cut the 53 and I'm asking myself, who are the guys that are going to be here? And Fortner played 2,200 snaps his first 2 seasons in the NFL. Right. So I think this is a really admirable job from what Jacksonville has done to take the holdover pieces that you felt like we can work with Harrison and Little and Cleveland and say, hey, let's go hit free agency and target players to, what was the phrase about the ecosystem around, elevate the ecosystem?
Guys that can elevate the ecosystem. Yep. Guys that are intangibly rich.
I think McCarry and Hainsey are guys that elevate the offensive line ecosystem. And then Milam as a third round draft choice is kind of your util player right now. Like, I like the composition and I like the position flex. And if I'm trying to cut down names and you tell me, well, you got Luke Fortner as the backup center, but I got 2 other guys that can snap and we're only going to keep maybe 9 guys. Do I want to move on from that guy before we just put him on waivers? Like, you know what I mean? Like they're good problems to have, but they're the kinds of dynamics when I look at Jacksonville beyond. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I've got sufficient level starters across the board. And there's not a lot of offensive lines we'll say that for.
Right.
And I mean, there may be some guys that have like big time needle movers in 2 or 3 spots to go with a quality depth player as the 5th guy. But across the board, I think we're really sturdy. It's a high floor, low ceiling, with the exception of like Harrison, I think has continued room to grow.
Well, I think real quick, one last thought on Fortner. Balky did draft him in 22, but Peterson, after 2 years of starting or 1 year of starting, said, we're good. We're going to sign Mitch Morse. And then another opportunity here. And they're like, yeah, we're going to bring in Robert Hainsey. I think there's some writing on the wall there, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him be a casualty here in some way, shape, or form.
Do a pick swap.
Yeah, something like that. And give him a shot to maybe latch on somewhere else. Okay, we did this thing again where we wait to start the defensive conversation. So the entire third segment, we are talking about this Jaguars defense that was a disaster last year, but I'm not sure it was a talent issue. We'll break it all down here for you next. Be sure to stick with us. All right, Jacksonville Jaguars defense. Let's start off the edge. It's Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, and boy, I think it's a really good pair, and I like the depth too. Dwan Smoot's back, I think, is a depth player. That's fine. Emmanuel Ogbah is a depth player. That's fine. Dennis Gardeck, what a unique football player. Injured last year with Arizona, but I feel like he can carve out a little role for himself. I feel like that is a really good group, especially when your starters are Allen and Walker. And Walker are kind of a controversial number one pick, but you knew it was going to be a process, right, for him to maximize on his physical traits. I think he's taken steps every single year, and he's on a really good path. And so we'll have some other questions here about this defense, but I don't really have any when it comes to this edge situation. I have a cornerstone in Allen, a quality starter in Walker, and some quality depth pieces behind them.
Did you see what they had Hines Allen playing at last year?
Weight-wise?
Yeah.
What was it?
Do you have a guess?
I have no idea.
285.
That's not a good spot. Get the weight off. Get him back down.
With the Nielsen scheme, he said he was, quote, much bigger. My mindset was always to be as dominant, but obviously holding a little bit more weight kind of puts a little bit more wear and tear on the body. So just slimming back down again this year, which I think is a good. It's one of those diminishing returns things, right?
Yeah.
Josh Hines Allen at 265 or 270 versus 285, like, especially with what he can do as a stand-up rusher.
My favorite thing about Josh Allen is the explosiveness and the bend. I wouldn't do anything to take away from that. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's super good. It's my fault. I didn't say Hines. That's on me.
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of your perspective. I have Hines Allen, cornerstone. I have Trayvon Walker, quality starter at this point. That's how I have those two graded out. Interior,
yeah, a little bit. This interior situation to me is all about what type of development you get from recent draft picks in Mason Smith, Jordan Jefferson, and Tyler Lacey. Now, James Gladstone didn't bring any of these players into the fray, but they are recent high picks, and I think you kind of know what Devon Hamilton is as a good run stuffer that's not going to give you much on passing downs. And Eric Armstead, I mean, if we'll call him an interior player. I think he can help this team. I have him as a sufficient starter, but to me, it's about those young players, Smith, Jefferson, Lacey, and what type of growth they can demonstrate to elevate this interior, because this could be a major question mark if you don't get steps out of those players.
Yeah, so I like the role specificity of you get in obvious passing situations and you know what you have in Eric Armstead. You get in short yardage and early neutral downs, you know what you have in Devon Hamilton to help defend the run, especially when you foil it with the linebacker room that's behind him, right? Like I think you can count on being pretty stout up the middle on early downs against the run. But what does the formational flex like? Obviously, part of the appeal of Trayvon Walker is the alignment versatility to come inside. And maybe that's part of this puzzle for them as well. But I think second and fourth round draft choices 15 months ago in Jefferson and Smith is a great call out on your part, because there's cost control there with rookie contracts. Their recent investments, although not from this regime, you have length, you have heavy hands. Like, how can you use that to build? But what really strikes me for Gladstone, as far as like the roster composition of all this, a really different stylistic front than what the Rams built when Gladstone was there for that transition, right? So I think the interesting thing for that is obviously Anthony Campanile coming in as the defensive coordinator, was the linebackers coach in Miami for a really long time, went to Green Bay for a year. That's a little bit more of a Brian Flores, Bill Belichick style defense. Rams new age front it's just a lot of pieces that I'm interested to see how stylistically they all fit together.
Yeah, that was a question I had down for you. Is what style of defense you think we're going to get here under Coach Campanile, who I know was in Miami for a number of years with Flores, but also he's got a lot of Jeff Hafley influence with him, multiple years at Boston College together, and then of course last year with Green Bay. It's like, what do we assume based on
the melting pot of
right? Just everything. Just assume everything.
Yeah. So it's if Coach Campanile does the job well, you tailor it to what the traits of your players are, and that should tell you quite a bit. But yeah, it really is interesting to kind of look at the influences and backgrounds and the different flavors of defensive styles that are mixing here to build this team with a bunch of holdovers from the guy who, if you had 35-inch arms and heavy hands, you were just going to get drafted ASAP. Because that was that was the bulky ideology.
Right. Somebody figure out what the Don Bosco Prep High School in New Jersey was doing defensively back in the early 2000s. Maybe that'll tell us what the true Anthony Campanile defense is. How about this linebacker situation, Cal? Their top 4 are back, right? And I really like Devin Lloyd and Foye Oluokun. I think those are quality starters. Chad Muma, Ventrell Miller, all back. And then for a team that traded away their first-round pick next year, right? They invested 2 picks in linebackers in Kaiser and McLeod. And it just makes me wonder, they didn't pick up the option on Devin Lloyd, which I think is that's the right decision based on how it's inflated. Yeah, it's a silly situation. It's just like the Tyler Linderbaum situation with the Ravens. You're not going to pay him like he's a tackle because he's a center. But I like those guys in Lloyd and Oluokun, and I think Miller and Muma are good developing depth players. But a little curious to me that they still felt burdened to use 2 of their draft picks, and Kaiser was he a 4 if I'm not mistaken?
4, yeah.
There must be some vision here to get some succession plans in place, perhaps.
I would assume so, but also looking at the group, Kaiser a little bit more undersized, a little bit more. I'll say undersized, but undersized relative to you're in a room with Oluokun and Devin Lloyd, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like very different size profile at linebacker. I think he moves fairly well in space. I think the Senior Bowl was a good showcase for him for some coverage stuff. And I just think, knowing Ventrell Miller coming out in 23 was the see ball, get ball type of player. Lloyd had some mobility. Oluokun's a tackling machine. Muma had some nice flashes at Wyoming in coverage, right? But I wouldn't call that the strength of the linebacker room is the coverage stuff. I think that there's a role-specific opportunity for Kaiser if he comes in and really latches onto the defense. And then, I think you will probably look at a succession plan because you're transitioning where some of your cash investments are and what rooms you need to see really materialize and come to life. I have the top 2 the same as you do, though. Those 2 quality starters.
Yeah. So some really nice talent in this front. I mean, you look at the front 7. We both have 3 quality starters and a cornerstone.
And there's depth on the edge and at linebacker.
Yeah, it seems pretty good. How about safety? Eric Murray, Darnell Savage. Those feel like placeholders to me.
Caleb Ransall, right?
That's the future here for sure.
3rd round draft choice this year. Savage, he came in on free agency last year, if I remember correctly. Had a nice run in Green Bay. There's been experience in the nickel. There's been experience as a deep safety. I think that's the thing that stands out to me. What do you got?
I just, with signing Jordan Lewis to go with Tyson Campbell and Jarian Jones, I don't see slot snaps available for Darnell Savage. I think he's going to play deep.
But that whole safety room, Ransall, Antonio Johnson, Savage, Eric Murray, these are all guys with some level of they all have some level of experience playing like in the nickel or playing some cornerback.
It's not dissimilar to what we've seen Green Bay do. And
with that influence, the Hafley influence,
all right,
in what they've assembled,
connecting the dots here a little bit.
Yeah. And the funny part of that, of course, is that Savage was in Green Bay and then left when Hafley got there, and now is getting the experience here. Where like, hey, maybe Green Bay can see what they have. But you mentioned the corners and Campbell and Lewis and Jones and Travis Hunter. I think they have pieces here, but me guessing how they're gonna stack them and who's claiming what jobs and who's playing inside, who's playing outside, like that's the big question that I have with them is you mix the safeties and all these guys have a lot of really attractive interchangeability, but who's like the cornerstone that you're stacking the whole house around?
Well, I think after this Tyson Campbell's second season, that felt like the guy. I think he's been kind of rough the last 2 years, and maybe that's some of the scheme changes, and which have been pretty drastic. Like, let's be honest about it. But hopefully that can stabilize, because there's been some really good play out of Tyson Campbell, and I think even Monteric Brown last year showed himself as a decent depth player as he's gotten more and more
drafted by 2 or 3 rounds.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
Yeah, some of these guys that don't have like the plus physical traits, you see this happen. Obviously you got to love what Jerry and Jones did as a rookie last year. Jordan Lewis is a commitment they made in the slot. I think there's pieces individually are attractive. I think putting it all together is going to be fascinating. And there's the Travis Hunter factor here. And I find myself curious with Travis Hunter. Is he a guy that's going to be full-time on one side of the ball and part-time on another? Is he going to be part-time on both? Like, they have to figure this out. It's very important. There's a lot invested in getting Travis Hunter, and it can be really, really special, but hopefully they have the right vision from the outset to maximize how he can impact the football team. And I think that's going to be a challenging needle to thread, and it's a good problem to have, but what I think you want to avoid is reflecting back and thinking, you know what, we just didn't have him in the right situations consistently enough to provide the impact that he's capable of. And so that's like a puzzle piece on both sides of the ball that, I don't know, it's an interesting layer. It's an unprecedented layer that I've never had to explore. And I'm fascinated to see how it goes, how it, plays itself out.
I think that's the central theme for me with Jacksonville is there's a lot of there's a big infusion of new talent in spots with holdovers from a previous regime. Really fascinated to see how they go about their business. And it seems like they have some new ideas. It seems like they're progressive with even just their team media with Baselli and Gladstone and Cohen and how
I've enjoyed it.
They're presenting the organization, right? Yeah. I'm interested to see what that product becomes when you apply that through the football operations.
Final thought here on Jacksonville in general. This isn't a team from a talent perspective that, picked in the top 5 and has a new head coach and a GM. Like, there's way worse situations out there. Mm-hmm. And I just wonder how that affects their timeline. We also have a paid quarterback here in Trevor Lawrence, right? He's only 25 years old.
That's all he is.
Dude, that's all he is. I was looking that up this morning. He's 25 years old. He turns 26 in October. He's been in the league since 2021. So this is such an interesting melting pot of like dynamics of an organization that I don't necessarily anticipate to all be true simultaneously. To have this level of talent, to have a paid quarterback that's this young, it still has a lot to prove, but has proven a lot, but you still have some questions about, that has like some real potential stars in multiple places on this roster in a division that, I mean, I certainly give Houston their flowers for being kind of the perceived best team, but I mean, it feels in some degrees wide open after that.
Yeah. It's like I said, this is one of those X factor teams for me, because I do think the talent was disproportionate, and you felt like we were on Doug Peterson fired watch by midseason, and they just wrote it out, right? Yeah. Like, and you were wondering if they were going to make that change. They did not. So all eyes on Jacksonville, but that's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out Locked On NFL Scouting. We'll talk to you all again tomorrow.